it's funny because like I know you say you don't like getting into politics, but it's. I was listening to Ruslan and he was talking to this comedian went on. And he says he's not religious or anything, not on there, but he went on Joe Rogan show. But he was talking about he was like I have to respect Christianity and all these other religions. He's like whether you believe in them or not. He's like we all believe in them in some sort. And the guy was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, at some point, someone had to say it was bad to steal. It was bad to kill. He's like, we all fundamentally believe that. But at some point, man didn't believe that. So he's like, so it had to come from somewhere. It's not, he's like, and he says with slavery, he's like, back in the day before people started saying slavery was wrong, if you could take a person, you took them. No one thought of it as being completely wrong because you had power, you took what you wanted. At some point, someone had to fight and say, no, it's wrong to own another person. And he's like, but we don't think about that because we've lived in a society for so long that knows slavery is wrong.
Wow.
He's like, so you start looking at it, he's like, you see religious beliefs in all different areas of life, whether you think you believe in religion or not.
Yeah.
Because it fundamentally came from somewhere.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, you know, they'll use during the slavery times of the U.S. as a very negative impact because some of the slave owners were Christians and things or claimed to be Christians and things like that.
Right.
And he made a good point because everyone looks at the negative part that they would use the Bible to keep slaves under slavery. But if you notice, if you look in history, they actually removed a lot of the Bible scriptures and books and stuff like that so that slaves wouldn't know about freedom and stuff. If there was any mention of freedom, it was removed.
Oh, wow.
And so Ruslan was making the point of if you keep the whole Bible, it actually brings freedom. He's like, they had to manipulate the Bible to possess people.
Man.
It was so like if they had given them the whole Bible, they knew there was going to be an uprising because the word of God brings freedom and it automatically leads towards that. Welcome to the No Name Podcast. Hopefully you guys kept up with the other episodes. We're going through the book of John. We're on episode 49, jumping into John chapter 6. Which is really, I mean, I guess we keep saying this. A lot of the John is full packed. I mean, chapter 6 is has quite a bit on there. So we'll try to get to all of it. If we need to, we'll break it up to 2 episodes because there is quite a bit in here. You got Jesus feeding the 5,000. You have him walking on water, and then you have a second part where they're asking him to re-perform the miracle, and he says no. And then you kind of have a rejection of who he is, and then a turning away of some of the disciples.
Yeah, some of the disciples.
So
he said, "You're gonna betray me."
He does bring that up. He brings up that one of them will betray them. That towards the end, I do think that's interesting. An interesting part that he brings up, because I think, and we'll come back to it. I think we probably started the feeding of the 5,000, but I think the interesting part of that is we have the luxury of sitting back and knowing the end of the story, so we know who did it and stuff like that. If you take a moment, you put yourself in these disciples' shoes, like. They don't know who it is.
Of course.
And so are they all wondering, is it me? You know, what's going through their thought process of, is it me? Because I think Jesus told them that way because I think inevitably, even though a lot of people think, okay, Jesus chose Judas to do it, this and that. If you read through it, you saw instances of it, but it wasn't until Judas is there and he's already made up his mind and the devil, it says like Satan came into him or whatever. But I think if you look at it, I think Jesus did it that way because in essence, I think it's important that we're all guarding our hearts because you never know when it's easy to say, I'll never betray you or leave you or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's something different when you're in a different circumstance of your life. When things
You know what I've learned? You know, I've learned never say never.
But because in this chapter 2, if you notice, Jesus knew that a lot of people were only following him because of the signs he was doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and
well,
the
that's
only reason that you see Judas, because it's like in other words, his crime was a habitual crime.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a high profile crime because he betrayed Jesus. But a lot of the other ones did the same thing.
Yeah. They betrayed.
Even when Jesus told them, what is it, that one of you will betray me?
Yeah.
They all started questioning themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it me? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I do think they were starting to see, like, what's interesting
They had
here.
something in their heart.
Well, I think what's interesting in here is you see, in all of this, you see a foreshadowing of what the disciples end up doing. Because here, like you were saying, like, let's just start off at the top. You look at it, a lot of times people jump in right into the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000.
Yeah.
But verse 2 highlights something for us, why they're all there. It says, then a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were diseased. Now, they didn't come to hear his lessons.
Nope.
They didn't come to hear his preachings. They came because they saw the signs.
Yeah.
They saw all the signs and wonders he was
But
doing.
ain't it crazy though how he used all of that to do his preaching stuff?
He did.
Right?
He did.
So
and I think it's a mixture of it, right? So I think Jesus knew that in order, my opinion, I think what Jesus came to understand and knowing man's heart is you have to get rid of the first part in order to affect the heart. So in other words, I think he knew the signs and wonders would bring them, but he also knew the signs and wonders would close their ears, but a seed would be planted and they would come to it later on. Like what you see through this story is you have no idea those that reject him later on are those part of the first church in Acts. Like no one took record of their names and said, okay, these are the people that walked away at the feeding of 5,000.
Right.
But now come back, right? And that's part of the cycle, I think, even like in today's church. Like it's one of the things that if all the time you're coming for signs and wonders and miracles, then that's why I think you'll hear Jesus say, if you have ears, them with ears, let them hear. Because a lot of times we're coming and we're hearing for the miracles, we're hearing for the good stuff, we're hearing for these things. We don't want to hear the bad stuff. We don't want to hear that you're going to be persecuted. You don't want to hear that that life's not going to be easy. That guess what? You're going to live life the same way as you're going to go through circumstances the same way as people in the world are. And I think that's one of the hardest truths for Christians to understand, because a lot of times when we did come to Christ, we had that encounter in the first time, whether it was a healing, an answering, a comforting or whatever, and then you don't get that. And here in the feeding of the 5,000, you see that like he fed them, like he did this miracle.
It's crazy. Like you've seen. I know you've seen Chosen. We've all seen like the Chosen, right? And the way you haven't seen it. No,
see a cowboy movie.
So,
it's actually worth watching. It's actually a pretty good production.
But hold on. But if you watch the episode where he actually like he did that, like the way that they depicted that, I thought that it was really excellent, because like if you think like the multitude, right? You thinking like 5,000 people. It only said 5,000 men. It didn't even, you know what I mean, like, and the way, right, and the way that he preached his message, the way they showed it, like they had one person over there, and then they had one person over there, and he was repeating it, and it was repeated all the way down so that everybody could hear it. That was,
And the thing about Jesus too, because he was half man, half God.
Of course,
he was the Son of God, but. You see, before even all this began, he went and chose his 12 disciples, and these were the men that he was going to teach and train, because he knew that he wasn't going to be on this earth for a long time. So he concentrated his time and energy and everything to those 12 men, even though he preached to the multitudes and all that.
Right.
And it would have been very easy for him like any of us. You see it nowadays when there's big crowds, multitude, mega churches, and all that. So easy to fall to the big congregations, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But all that.
Yeah.
And let it take you for a ride. But Jesus knew, he ministered to them when they gathered, but he concentrated on his 12 because he knew those were the 12 that once he left, they were the ones that were gonna take off. I mean, there were other ones because other disciples.
One thing, but I think we have to, I think you have to peel that onion back a bit.
Right.
Like he focused on the 12, but that there's more that followed him.
Of course, right.
I think that's when like Paul and them get into different things of some were chosen to be apostles, some were chosen to be teachers, some were chosen to be this. These 12, it wasn't that they were the only 12 chosen to ever lead the church and this was it or whatever. These 12 were chosen to be the first apostles, the first ones to spread the word and to be eyewitnesses, because Jesus knew the time he was coming in, right? We have to understand God is not in time. Like God is outside of time. And so God knew the time he was coming in. There's no social media. There's no, to your point, like the way the Chosen depicts it, there was no microphones for Jesus to stand up. But so he's creating this change of mindset, and it's going to have to carry on. It's going to have to go forward. And by change of mindset, I think it was the mindset that God always intended, but man never understood.
Right.
This was supposed to be the clarity point.
I mean,
and so when you start looking at it that way, you have to understand, like, and Jesus mentions it, and sometimes we pass these small scriptures up. There's the 12, but then there was others around him. There was women who supported his ministry. You have no idea how long Mary Magdalene had been around, but it makes it seem like she was around quite a bit, because she's one of the ones that is there with Mary when Jesus is being crucified. They're one of the first ones to see him resurrected. So it's not like they left him and went back home. They were following him.
Right.
And so you have these followers that are there.
I understand that, because even he got rebuked. Disciples got rebuked when they came all mad that they had found 70 that were preaching the word and all that, and calling themselves disciples.
Yeah.
And they came to Jesus and said, hey, these people are saying that they're your disciples, and Jesus said, look, if they're not against us, why are you worried
about it? Right.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, you're right. But I'm saying too, but at the same time, Jesus had to give most of all his knowledge and everything he had to these men, because he chose them. He had picked these men.
And I mean, look though, like, I mean,
like now it's, because at that time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the religious people.
Right.
So you had to, in other words, they were the
ones. Yeah.
So Jesus had to come and break that mold and say, no, I can use anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody. Even though in the New Testament, it looked like Paul was the one that was used more to write more of the books instead of any of the 12 disciples. So God can use anybody,
Well, because, and again, I think that's where, I think when we peel back the onion on that, I agree. I mean, you're looking at it. I mean, I think there's many reasons why he chose the 12. Yeah. And if you look at it, he chose 12. And I think it was more of to have them, because he needed to spread them out. Because again, if you look, and I think that's why you see Paul probably more in the New Testament, because and Peter, and you'll see John too. But their job, and we're jumping way ahead. Right. So here's the thing, we got to pull ourselves back, because if you look at it, the whole point of the disciples was what? To be the last commission, to be the commission. Right. So their job was to go out and spread it out.
And share and spread, right.
Paul focused more on on the Gentile regions, but they went out. Like if you study church history, you'll see that all of the 12, except for like Peter and John, went out to other places. Like when you start seeing traces of Christianity in China and things like that in India, that you can tie it back to a disciple. Like disciples, they were traveling. That's why they say like some of the you see what is the one like there's a one group, I can't remember what they're called, but in the Middle East and things like that, they you see like I think Bartholomew and one of them, they all went to different, like they went to different areas because that's what Christ told them to go out and lead and go in that part. Peter, John, they were told to stay there. So again, it was a difference in their calling, and that's why I think you see the prevalence of Paul, because Paul focused on the early church, which was kind of interesting. That Paul's thing was Paul and Peter were focused on the early church. But all of that, if you come back to the feeding of the 5,000, you see, I mean, one, the people have gathered together because of the signs and wonder, and then two, it's interesting because yes, if you go back and you read it, there's two different feedings, right? There's the feeding of the 5,000 and feeding of the 4,000. I don't remember if the feeding of the 4,000 is also in John, because they're two separate ones. But in this one, it's interesting. Jesus sees they're hungry. He sees this, but he uses it for multi-purposes. Because one, he knows that they're coming because of the signs and wonders. Two, he literally just says, or John says this as he's writing. He says, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he was
going to do already.
Like, in other words, he's testing Philip. Like, this is to get, like, he uses the hunger of 5,000 people to test one, you know, but there's a purpose behind it, right? And I think it was to test all the disciples, but to test the one, right? And Philip comes back and says, "What? Like we don't
maybe work for money.
Lord, we wouldn't
have enough
way
money.
more money to even barely feed them, to give them scraps, right?" And then all of a sudden, I think Peter's brother Andrew, finds a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small breads, and Jesus performs this miracle, right?
Yeah, 2 small fish.
But the interesting part about it is I think it was for his disciples as well as to feed the people, right? Because he feeds the people, they get nourished and all of this stuff. Now, but here's the interesting part, and this is what I'm going to throw at my opinion on it, and maybe it's out there for you guys too as well. But the people didn't have to believe Jesus was going to do this, because nowhere in there does it say he announced it to the people that he was going to feed them. He just knows they're hungry. Nowhere in there does he say, "Okay, let us all pray together so that we can make enough." They're talking amongst themselves, saying,
"Hey, we hungry."
Yeah,
right.
And they're saying, how are we going to feed them?
It's going to take us a long time to get back to town.
I believe that even though there was 5,000 people there, Jesus was concentrating more on his disciples.
Yeah.
You know, and their faith and what they believe. Because they had already come to the conclusion that they needed money.
Yeah.
And they had already, you know,
they had already
got together and say, "Man,
we don't have money to the nearest town is like 2-3 hours away." Right.
I think there's somewhere says that you know what? Why don't you just dismiss them and let them go? You know? And we'll eat.
We can't call an Uber.
Yeah. and because right here it says that he was testing Philip. You know, testing him to see what he's going to come out. And the first thing Philip came out was with money. You know. We need a year's wages in order to feed all these people.
Well, and that's why, because we've had this discussion before a few times on things, and like, I think like Jesus didn't need the people to believe that he could provide the fish for them.
Right.
And for most of them, they're gonna find out this is what he did, right? They somehow find out, right? Because they asked for it again later on. Yeah. But in this moment, they have no idea that there's only 5 fish and 5 loaves and 2 fish. The disciples do. To your point, he's highlighting something for them, and that's why I find it interesting too, right? If you're doing this, so let's jump past that piece to the point of what does he have them do afterwards? He has them go and pick up the scraps.
Right.
Now, if you just performed a miracle and you're not sure, like, hey, we have 5 loaves, 2 fish. We may just barely make it. The last thing you want is someone going and picking up all the scraps. There shouldn't be any scraps. Like, there shouldn't be nothing left over.
But there was scraps left.
But there's 12 baskets, right? And so, to me, again, that was like, to your point, for the disciples, for them to understand that, look, I'm not just giving you enough. I'm gonna cover.
Right.
I'm gonna go beyond
enough.
Beyond that. Now, let's be careful. Like, I don't like people trying to use this as a prosperity gospel that says, well, then if I can bring 2 fish and 5 loaves.
No, definitely
No, that's not what it was.
Yeah.
It was just for them to understand how much the power that God had, and in trusting in him, nothing's too small for him.
Right.
And I think that's what he was trying to push to his disciples.
Yeah, I mean, prosperity is something tremendous, but God, even us, I don't know any of your experience. When you have a need, God gives you more than what you needed.
Oh yeah.
Not because, to make you rich or whatever, because like I tell people, God doesn't mind you living a good life and you having good things.
I believe that.
As long as you remember that
it came from. That's right.
You to get it. Giving it to you.
Yeah.
Well, I think
the moment you start thinking it's you.
Yeah.
Just you, then that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is also the looking at this, and this goes outside of this scripture, and that's why because we always get tied into because
but, like here, there was 12 baskets, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That they picked up from the leftovers.
I think so.
Remember, the disciples were hungry. But Jesus made them waiters. He told them, go and feed the people.
Yeah, he didn't tell them to eat too.
And then if they were Mexicans, they were probably saying, I'm just going to give them just a little piece of bread, a little piece of fish. But Jesus told them, give them what they want.
Yeah.
Imagine that. And if I was a disciple, I would have think, what do you mean what they want? They're all starving to death. They're all gonna.
But there it goes again. Like it goes back to your point of like, you know what, Jesus was trying to teach him something, man.
Well, I think I think when you take a step back, and that's one of the things, when you take a step back, it says here Jesus already knew what he was gonna do.
Yeah, of course,
what was gonna happen.
Yeah,
but we keep looking at this as a microscopic event.
Scripture, right?
We're looking at this one event. This one event led to all the events in the chapter.
Yeah.
You go from them needing faith on feeding, the people being fed, to them being scared on how Jesus walked on water, to them being, you didn't think Jesus, knowing that he fed them, that in a matter of a day, they were going to come and try to make him king? He knew. It set it up for him to be able to say.
That's why he escaped. That's why he scurried off. He's
here's the thing.
It ain't my time.
We talked about this the last time, and I forgot that it is in the book of John. There's 7 I am statements that Jesus makes.
Right.
And this sets up for one of them, for him to come and tell the people, I am the bread of life. Using the words that he used, I am, goes all the way back to Moses.
Again, here we go.
With God saying, I am.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand, these are Jewish people. He used the words that God himself invoked. Like that's like
to stone someone.
Yeah, that's why they started walking away. Yeah. It was 2 things. He said, "I am the bread of life." In other words, he was telling them, I'm God. I'm God in the flesh. I'm the bread of life.
Yep.
And now he's telling them that they got to eat from him.
That's like blasphemy.
So he's creating a concept for them that's just tripping them out.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like this whole piece, he's setting up for. Like, he knows by him feeding them here, giving them the food, he's done several different things. He set himself up for the biggest part, which is the second time they come to him, which is about where is the true source of life. Like, imagine that. Like, if you, like, every preacher, if you ever study them, are always trying to find, if you study preachers, I guess it's not a secret. If you have your 3 5-point sermon, you're always looking for that one analogy to knock people with in the beginning. Yeah. You grab their attention, then you, okay, now I deliver my 3 points. Right. What's his name? In his books, he's really good about it. Max Lucado is he has mastered the art of this. If you look at Max Lucado, in his books, he'll write in the beginning like a short story of some people, and he brings it to modern life, and then he goes through, and then at the end he ties in, oh yeah, that was Peter, oh yeah, that was Mary, oh yeah, that was so and so. So he brings you in with the illustration and then does it. Jesus just did it in a physical form. He knew they were going to get hungry. He knew they were going to need to be fed, so he fed them physically. They got focused on the physical, but then he was going to deliver the spiritual to them. And telling them, I am the bread of life.
Because it goes back to people, goes back to the scripture where they say that they were following him because of the miracles and all that, because that's Christianity. Most people are always following the next greatest church, the next greatest pastor, the next greatest evangelist, and all this, and most of them don't want to be students of the Word of God.
Well, that's completely.
It's like now that we're hitting more the Word. We're in this podcast. We're teaching, in other words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you'll notice that a lot of people are not listening to it because they don't want. Now it's a Bible study, technically, and we're not doing it a Bible study.
I don't know if it's a Bible study.
No, I'm just saying because now we're getting into the Word.
Well, okay. you're getting into the Word, and it gets. You have to look at things in yourself. Like right. I think a lot of times, and again, that's why I think the church is meant to be a place to fellowship, to connect with other believers, to help each other and become accountable. The church ended up becoming a place where honestly, the church became what the synagogues back in Jesus' time were. That's the only time you met with God. You went to the synagogues, and I take that with a grain of salt because there was a lot of Jewish people who had a very, I think, good relationship with God, and that they do their morning prayer. Like that's what I do like about The Chosen. They do show Jesus' Jewish side. Like we forget a lot of Jewish customs, a lot of Jewish things. Like Jesus didn't say he stopped being a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. Right. He's a Jewish Messiah. Like that's a very clear statement that he's making. But he came to save the whole world. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you start seeing here is a lot of times in the preachings, and it's not, I don't want to say it's a negative, but we'll focus on the miracle, right? Okay, well, Jesus is there. He's going to bless over abundantly and blah, blah, blah. But if you're not coming back and getting the Word, you're not seeing the full lessons of it. Like part of it is learning to trust in God. And sometimes you're going to fail at it because even after the feeding of the 5,000, what happened? The disciples go into the boat. There's a storm. There's a storm. And they see someone They see someone walking. Now, what's interesting is if you see some other ones, and I wanted to look it up and I didn't have a chance to, but in other accounts, there's Peter asking to come out of the boat. Yeah. Now, I can't remember if Jesus walked on water several times or if it was a one-time event. So I'm sorry if I missed that piece. But here, this is not about Peter coming outside of the boat. But what's interesting is they're freaking out, right? And to me, you would think, and this is where it's easy for us to be judgmental of them, but you would think, wait a second, we just saw him feed 5,000 people. There's something walking in water. You would think your mind connects. But here's the thing. There's being able to think about it like as a what they would call a Monday couch quarterback or whatever. It's easy to look at it the next day and say this is what you should have done. Yeah. And it's something else. Human nature is to fall back to things. So I mean, here they were. They're in a fearful spot, and that's why I don't think like Jesus was teaching them. And this part of the story, it doesn't go deep into it, but other ones, you hear the conversation of what goes on in that boat. But on this one, I just find it interesting and understandable. Like they're in this spot, they see Jesus do this miracle. Jesus tells them go in the boat. They go in the boat. The storm happens, and because that they're in fear, they fall back to their nature. What their natural nature is to be scared. And so when they see someone walking on the water, they don't recognize Jesus. Yeah. And how many times is that for us in our Christian walk? We know the scriptures. Yeah. We sing about it. We talk about God. But then we face that storm and then we fall back to our nature. And it's okay. It's okay as long as you come out of it, right? Yeah. Like it's okay to be scared. It's okay to doubt, to be upset with God sometimes. Like it's okay. Yep. But then where do you come back out of it?
Go ahead, man.
I think that I think that sometimes we get it wrong with the Bible. I think we look at the
I get it wrong. I mean a lot of times I get it wrong.
In a simple perspective, meaning the Bible is meant to help us to live our life.
Yep.
You know, the Bible is meant to correct us. You know, the Bible was created out of love for us. Yeah. You know, not to condemn us and be like, oh, you shouldn't, you're wrong, and you know, like, and I think that's what, you know, is, you know, a turnoff for a lot of people, because they think like you got to read the Bible and it's going to tell you, and you know what that is? That's just, you know, that's that inner you telling you like that what you're reading is the truth, because you can never ever dispute truth.
Yeah, and I think that's why, to me, the hardest part of all of this is actually being true to yourself.
Yeah,
being true to
you
see in this. It's
you have to
you look. These are 12 grown men. Some of them fishermen. Some of them. I don't know how, but at least the fishermen and some. These are 12. These are not men who just didn't do anything or whatever. They've been in storms. They've been in things. Like they're 12 men.
Especially the fishermen.
And what I say that is because here they had to admit they were afraid. Yeah. Like they see something going, and you have to admit you're afraid. Yeah. Like you're fearful, because Jesus calls them on it. He says, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah, that was the first thing he said. Yeah,
right. Because that's the thing, and I think that's some of the things. I think as we go through our walk with Christ, one of the things that we have to learn is not to be afraid of who we are in front of God,
and the trust.
And then He'll start working with us, because a lot of times it's easy to try to have what we call a Christian relationship if you're still hiding from God.
Yeah,
and the key is the relationship we have with God. Most people follow the blesser, you know, follow the blessing, not the blesser, you know, and you know, they're always looking for what I call an emotional high. Yeah. You know, throughout my years, look, since I started pastoring, at the beginning years of my pastoring, we would do revivals, dramas, you know, all kinds of things, and we would fill up the church, and we would fill up. I did a quinceañera yesterday at the Royal Palace, and I remember when we did a drama there, you know, and we flooded it with flyers and everything, and we were only supposed to have one showing at that time, and man, we packed it out right away, and we still had a big line of people, you know, there. So we did the first showing, and you know, we hadn't paid for the second showing. And I talked to the manager. He said, "Look, give me so much, and I'll let you have the second showing," because there were still people waiting. You know, so you know we've done a lot of things, you know, to spread the word and all that, and we would see the crowds come in and all that. But the moment the evangelist left, the moment the group, whatever group we brought here, or drama afterwards, only certain people would stay. You know, and then most people won't get, because the ones that will stay usually are the ones that were trying to have a relationship with God, an encounter with God.
Well, because
and a lot of them, hopefully, they went to other churches, and you know. And,
well, it kind of goes. It kind of goes into the.
It's like right here. It's like right here where Jesus knew that these people wanted to force him to be king.
Yeah.
That's why he left.
Oh, yeah.
Because he knew that if he stayed, the people were going to make him into a king.
Yeah.
And that was going to strap him. So he left.
Yeah.
Then the disciples snapped that Jesus wasn't there, and they left.
Which is also interesting, and which is interesting because if you remember, one of the things the devil tempted Jesus with was being the king of the world.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But to be a physical king. And you see, they were willing to make him a physical king. He didn't want to be a physical king of the world. He was going to be the savior of the world.
Right.
We call him King of Kings. Those are sayings that we say that people pull from from Bible and stuff. But he was never, he didn't want, because here's the thing, their mindset, you got to remember, that's why it's important.
Different time period.
Yeah, different time period. You got to read it from the Eastern mindset. The Jews were waiting for a warrior.
The prophecy.
They're waiting for a warrior king to come and save them. They're under Roman Empire right now. If you have a person, like people are like, well, why did they want to make him king? You got to remember how battles were fought back then.
Right.
If you could siege a city and you could starve them out, and you have a guy outside who can make sure you're fed, you'll win that war.
Win. Yep.
Because sooner or later, their resources are going to run out, but you have a guy that just keeps multiplying bread and fish. You can last years out there, or even if you're surrounded, you can last forever inside your fortress because no one's ever going to come because you have plenty of resources. You know, typical wars back then, they took long because you were waiting until someone got desperate enough to make a mistake.
Like King David. King David was a warrior. You know, he was a soldier. You know, and his desire one day was to build a tabernacle. You know, at that time, and God told him no, because you should.
Didn't the son build it?
You know,
right? Solomon built it, right?
Solomon.
But
he said, "But I'm gonna grant you your privilege through your son." He said, "You know." And Solomon's the one that built the tabernacle, but David's desire was to build it. See, but God chose David to be a warrior, to fight for his people, you know, to lead them, you know. And you know, some of us are going to be, you know, like the disciples.
But I think that's,
you know.
And I think we can come back for a second episode because I do think when you read the next piece, it kind of ties into something you were saying a second ago. There's the miracles and stuff, but then there's the relationship with Christ. And that's where Jesus was going, and that's what hammered them. You know, because if you bring people the miracles, if you bring people the answers, perfect. They don't ever have to do anything for themselves. Yeah. But the moment that they had to, he's now telling them, I'm the bread of life. You got to come and eat from me. You got to come. You know,
and they didn't understand that.
And
they're like,
now
what?
All of a sudden, so that's the thing. Like, you'll see these things like when revivals, even with church services and things like that, when all a congregation or people is doing is coming and they're only being fed on Sundays, or they're only being fed during revivals, or they're only being fed during this. It's no different than the people in this story, or the Israelites, or anyone else, in that they're not building their personal relationship with God. They're not having that relationship. It's like, even like right now, like, and I think it's a good thing, so don't take my comments as a negative. You have that Ashbury revival still going on that we talked about last time. I think it's a beautiful thing. It's fantastic. Yeah. Now the question is going to be is okay, people are going to take that and they're going to want to duplicate it, replicate it, and do all these things. But how many of those people afterwards are they just going to keep that relationship with God? That this is not just a feeding of the 5,000, but this is now their daily life. I do believe some of the ones that started that and that were in that because they weren't worried about growing to what it did, that was their daily relationship with God. Like, they were going there daily and seeking God, or in their Bible studies or whatever. They were, and God granted them this showing, and other people got to see it. But just like you know, I was thinking about this a second ago. When you look at the story right now that we were just talking about, Jesus walking on water, you have to remember that there's another group that was part of that. If you read the next scriptures, you have the disciples who lived it. That this was to encounter their fears. This was to, Jesus confronts their fears and things like that. But then you have the people on the other side who said, wait a second, disciples left on their own. Jesus wasn't with them, and now he's with them. And
so how did that happen?
They see is the miracle. They lived the miracle. They saw the miracle. And so you see them now tying it to the feeding of the 5,000 and wanting to be fed again, where the disciples are, Jesus is dealing with them. Then there was working on them. And I think that's one of the things that, like, even with this Ashbury thing, you have to look at it. There's some that God are dealing with, and there's some who are just on the other side looking at it. And they're just looking at the miracle and saying, oh, this is a great feeling. This is great, blah, blah, blah. But the ones that were in it, you have to remember, what did it come out of? It came out of someone confronting their confession, someone going and seeking God and doing stuff.
Trying to see him,
Because if you notice, Jesus had to do it twice on walking on water, you know, because this first time, it doesn't mention when Peter walked on the water.
That's why I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if he does it twice or if it's just because sometimes they tell the story a little differently.
They were waiting to get him in the boat, but then they didn't see him no more, and they were close to shore already. And the second time,
and then when they got him in the boat, they was already. The
second time was when Jesus had already died and resurrected, because remember, they all went back to their way of life, and he encountered them. You know, I think the second time.
Well, he calls them. That's not when Peter. That's not when Peter walks on water.
Okay,
No, the second time that time when he's already died and rose again is when he tells them to fish again on the other side.
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
he calls them in.
Right. But that's when he walks on water, right?
No.
Well, then there's 3 times.
Yeah, there might.
But what I'm saying, it's like anything like us. They had just seen a miracle from Jesus, and from the moment that God chose them, He started teaching them, and they had already seen a lot of signs and wonders of God. But now here, when the storm came, all of a sudden they forgot about all the miracles of all the things God had done in their lives and seen in other people's lives. Yeah. And that's just like our lives, we allow emotions to, like in church service, emotions run high when we hear songs and the words and the preaching, and we get emotional, and you know what, Lord, this is it. I'm gonna serve you with all my heart. I'm gonna, follow you no matter what. And then all of a sudden a storm hits, and you find yourself alone on the boat, and the doubt comes, and the fear comes, because sometimes we serve God more with emotions instead of our relationship with God.
And I think, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, I just think that sometimes we need to understand and know that it's a lifelong journey, man. It's not going to be, of course, people, we are emotional. That's just how we are, you know what I mean? But we have to learn that, it's not about your emotions.
But and it's kind of, but that's why there's a difference between the understanding your emotions and dealing with it. It's like even in a relationship, there's going to be emotions.
Of course, right.
But if your whole relationship is based on emotions, then that means your relationship is going to be up and down. If your relationship is built on the facts,
foundation of
the facts of it, then even when the emotions want to run one way or the other,
you're still going to be.
You're standing on that.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things, and I know we're running out of time, and that's why I want to make sure. Like, I think we need to come back to the second half because there's a lot in that second half.
Definitely.
One of the things I think you have to see in all of this as we go through it is the relationship part of it. You see Jesus going through that. You see him going through the feeding of the 5,000, the walking on there. But it's all about the relationship that's being built out of it, because when you're looking at and that's why, like, I think what you said something a second ago. When you looked at it, you have to look at the practicality of things. Like, God knows how to work and do things. Like the Ashbury revival and a couple of things. I heard someone make a commentary on this, and I thought it was really good. We can all have an Ashbury revival, but it may not be broadcast.
Yeah,
people may not know about it.
Right.
It might not even be at a church. It might just be you every day seeking God, and you're having your own revival there with God, or awakening, whatever you want to call it. I think one of the things is God also understands too, because you have to understand this Ashbury revival. God knows what He's doing. I believe God's in it. He knows what He's doing. Who did He pick to do this 24/7 with? College kids. What do college kids have to do? Most of them just wake up, go to school, eat. Maybe they have a job, maybe they don't,
not. Yeah,
but they're not worried about the day-to-day life. Now, if God called us to go 24/7, how many of us are going to have to be able to skip our job for 2 weeks and not get fired? and you see, God knows what He's doing, and it doesn't. It doesn't mean that we can't because we're putting our jobs ahead or we're putting this ahead of God. No, that's not what that means. God understands that. And it's more on the relationship.
Going back to what you said, when Jesus did the miracle, He didn't need the 5,000 to believe. And I don't think even the disciples to believe, because the disciples were still doubting. Yeah. And I know there's a scripture in the New Testament that says, where there are 2 or 3 gathered in His name, there I am too. And sometimes we forget that we get that literally saying, okay, I need one more person. I need one for God to be there. But we don't. God is always with us when you have a relationship with Him. If you start praying and having, because most of the time when you find yourself in a storm, you're going to find yourself in that storm by yourself.
Yep.
Or your family.
Yeah.
And then sometimes your family might not be around, or they might doubt or whatever, and you find yourself.
Well, that's why.
That's where you have to trust God.
Yeah.
Because Jesus knew that he couldn't count on the 5,000, and he couldn't really count on the disciples yet. So he had to rely on his relationship with his Father.
Yep.
You know, to do the miracle.
Well, I think that's where our relationship with God and just even personal relationships get tested.
And that's
in the
where
storm.
it goes to what you said, that Jesus used that phrase, I am.
Yeah.
Because that's what Moses told them. Who do I tell them send me? I am.
Yeah, I am. Yep.
You know, I am.
Yep.
You know, and a lot of folks, you know, they don't know who I am is.
Yeah.
You know, they just know the miracles that they see, the signs, you know, and like that the Asbury thing that's happening. See, that's what God wanted to use those people for. Doesn't mean that, God can do almost the same thing somewhere else, but God might want to do it differently, you know, because where's Asbury? In the United States, right?
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's in another state, right?
Yeah.
Like the Carolinas or something.
Somewhere.
So God might,
Connecticut,
like
I don't
here in
know.
our city, he might want to use something, almost the same thing, but something different.
Yeah.
Or it may not even. It
Right,
may,
or
it may
it may
just,
not
it's
even.
just personal
But you
ones.
know,
Yeah.
Or maybe,
but sometimes we will always want to duplicate what
But-
someone else does.
Yeah.
but the problem is, and again, they're looking at the outside. In order to you can have those things, but
Right.
again, it's at a personal level. Like, we have no idea how long those kids have been praying.
Have been-
we have
yeah.
no idea what their personal relationship
Yeah.
with God is and things like that. All we see is, someone started confessing their sins, and all of a sudden people
It
started
just-
playing music, and it just
it
kept
just-
going.
and it just blew up in the-
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure, if anything, this has been building up. This has been something that's been building up, and whatever, if it was 10, 15, 20, whatever that small group of people that were there, it was building up.
Yeah.
God was already doing something.
And they
Now we
and-
just
and-
got
yeah.
to see the outside
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And they probably weren't doing it for that.
No, they weren't,
God
but-
just used
I'm sure that they
you know.
weren't. Yeah.
God just used it. You
But-
know, they were having what was
But
it,
that's
a
why-
Bible study or
Yeah, they were
fellowship
just
or
having their
whatever it
they're
was.
just having their Bible class, and I mean,
You know,
but I think
and-
that's where we have to take from that, and we have to learn that we can have the same thing if we're keeping our daily relationship with God.
You know?
And it doesn't mean that 20, 30 people are going to end up doing this or whatever. Like even if you, like, I don't like planned revivals. Like, I've made myself very clear on a lot of the podcasts. I don't really like them. But to me, in order for a revival or awakening to happen, it's not about planning it. It's about what are you doing before that. Like if the congregation is praying, seeking God already and things like that, that's what ignites a revival, not setting a couple of days and bringing in a special preacher. It's it's starting to open yourself up to it. And I truly believe America can have a great awakening, a revival, whatever people want to call it. It's just a matter of what are we doing on our own basis of having that
It's
relationship.
like sometimes we read about other, like, what's that guy, Paul Young Show? I don't know if you guys ever heard of him. I think he was from China or somewhere. Can't remember where he was from, but he started ministering over there, and his ministry exploded, and people were walking miles to reach to where he was having services and all that, you know. And sometimes we read things like that and say, oh man, that's what we need in our church and all that, but they don't see what they were doing before everything exploded, and the desire of those people. Imagine walking miles and miles to go to a service. You know, we don't even want to drive here. You know, and then when we're here, a lot of us just complain. You know, about everything instead of being here, being grateful for what God did, gave us another day. We made it fine to the church and all that. You know, but yeah, we see this. Oh, I want to, man. Hopefully, God uses us like that and all that, and you know. But you know, once we have a relationship with God, God will lead you and guide you. You know, and show you we have this. You know, He'll connect us all together to the same vision of what God wants to do in our ministry, in our church. You know.
No, totally agree. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you read all of the chapter 6. We're going to finish off chapter 6 next time. I think jump to 7 because the second half of chapter 6 has a lot of key verses, a lot of things into his teaching. So, again, thank you for being with us. Hit the like and subscribe button and keep passing it along.